All right, let's talk about it. We're going to tackle one of the biggest, most nerve-wracking questions in all of personal finance. You've done the work, you've saved up $500,000, but is it actually going to be enough for a decent retirement?
So here it is, the big question. Is $500,000 really enough? I mean, for a lot of us, that number is the finish line we've been running toward our entire careers. But is it enough to actually carry you through 20, 30, or maybe even 40 years of not working? That is exactly what we are going to figure out.
You know, I wish I could just give you a simple yes or no here, but the truth is, it's just not that easy. How long that money actually lasts depends on a bunch of moving parts. Things like your own spending, the wild ride of the stock market, and of course, that quiet little thing called inflation.
So here's our game plan for breaking this all down. We're going to start with the thing you have the most control over, your spending. Then we'll dive into the big wild cards like inflation and market craziness. We'll also look at how your own life and needs change over time. And we'll wrap it all up with what I think is the most powerful tool in your entire toolbox, flexibility. Okay, first things first, let's talk about the single biggest lever you can pull, and that is your spending rate. This is the one factor you are directly in charge of, and believe me, it has a massive, immediate impact on how long your nest egg is going to stick around.
You've probably heard about this thing called the 4% rule, right? It's a classic rule of thumb. The idea is you can safely take out 4% of your total savings in your very first year of retirement. So with $500K, that's $20,000. Then every year after that, you just adjust that amount for inflation. It was designed to give you a pretty steady income for about 30 years without running dry.
Now this is where it gets really interesting. Look at how a little extra spending can just torpedo your portfolio's lifespan. If you're spending 20, maybe 30 grand a year, your $500,000 can last a good long while. But check out what happens when you jump to 40,000 a year. Poof, the money's gone in 18 years. And at 50,000, you're out of cash in just 13 years. It's kind of crazy, right? That one little difference in your yearly budget can be the tipping point between a long, comfy retirement and running out of money way too soon.
But, okay, let's say you get your spending just right. There's another invisible force working against you every single day, inflation. You got to think of it like a silent, slow leak in your retirement boat. It doesn't seem like much at first, but over a few decades, its effect is absolutely enormous.
I just love this quote from Sam Ewing. It's so perfect. It just nails that feeling of your money not going as far as it used to. What $20,000 buys you today, well, it's going to buy you a whole lot less in 10 or 20 years.
And this chart, man, it just brings the whole thing to life. See that blue line at 2% inflation? It's a nice, slow, gentle slope down. But look at that orange line. At 4% inflation, the drop is way steeper. By the time you hit 85, every dollar you have is only going to buy what 50 cents buys today. Your purchasing power gets literally sliced in half. That is a huge chunk out of your lifestyle. And you will not believe how sensitive your plan is to this. Some research shows that for a typical retiree, just a tiny 1% difference in inflation can be the deciding factor. I mean, look at this. At 2% inflation, the plan works out, you're good. But bump it up to just 3%, and suddenly the money's gone 5 years early. Think about that for a second. 1% is the difference between feeling secure and running out of money.
Okay, next up is something that, honestly, a lot of people just don't think about: the timing of the market. It's not just about your average return over the years. It's about when you get those returns. The stock market's performance in your first few years of retirement is, well, it's absolutely crucial. This is called sequence of returns risk, which is really just a fancy way of saying you have bad luck and retire right into a terrible market. If your portfolio takes a huge hit right at the beginning, you're forced to sell your investments when they're cheap just to live, and that digs a hole that is almost impossible to climb out of, even when the market eventually bounces back. Let's picture two different retirees. They both start with $500,000, they both withdraw the exact same amount, and they even get the same average return over 20 years. The only thing that's different is the order of those returns. The person who gets bad returns right out of the gate could see their portfolio just shrivel up and never recover. But the person who gets lucky with good returns early on, they build up a cushion that helps them ride out the bad years later. Same money, same average return, but one retires comfortably and the other runs out of cash. That's the terrifying power of sequence risk.
So we've talked about the math, but let's talk about the human side of this for a minute. We tend to think of retirement spending as this flat, predictable line. But that's not how life works, is it? In reality, our spending changes as we get older, and it actually follows a pretty predictable pattern.
A lot of financial planners talk about the 3 phases of retirement. First up, you've got the go-go years. You're newly retired, you feel great, and you're spending more on travel and hobbies and just loving life. Then come the slow-go years. You naturally start to slow down a bit, and your spending on those big-ticket activities goes down. And finally, you have the no-go years, where things like travel really drop off, but this is often when healthcare costs start to creep up.
So you get this sort of U-shaped pattern, right? High spending at the start, a dip in the middle, and then it rises again at the end, mostly because of healthcare. It's often called the retirement spending smile. And just knowing this can completely change how you approach your retirement plan.
And this isn't just some cute theory. It has a huge impact on your money. One study found that retirees whose spending followed this natural smile pattern had a 73% chance of their money lasting. But for folks who got hit with big, unexpected healthcare costs, that success rate plummeted to basically a coin toss, 50-50. It's a powerful reminder to really plan for that potential spike in medical bills later on.
So we've seen how your spending, inflation, and pure market luck can make or break your retirement. And that might sound a little intimidating, I get it. But it all leads us to the single most important strategy you have for success, and that is flexibility.
Listen, the days of just setting a rigid rule like the 4% rule and then putting your finances on autopilot, those days are over. The world is just too unpredictable. The real key to making your $500,000 last isn't about finding one perfect magical number. It's about building a dynamic plan that can bend and adapt to whatever life throws at you.
So what does a flexible plan actually look like? Well, it boils down to a few key moves. It means you use dynamic spending. You tighten your belt a little and withdraw less when the market is having a bad year. It means you have a budget that clearly separates your absolute needs from your wants, so you know exactly where you can cut back if you have to. It might mean delaying Social Security to lock in a bigger, guaranteed paycheck for the rest of your life. And it absolutely means having a cash emergency fund so you are never, ever forced to sell your investments at the worst possible time.
You know, ultimately, it's about shifting your whole mindset. The real goal here isn't to die with the most money possible on a spreadsheet. It's about using the resources you have as a tool to live the best, most fulfilling life you can, while making sure you don't outlive your savings. So let's circle all the way back. How can you make your $500,000 last? The answer isn't a number. It's a strategy. By understanding these forces, spending, inflation, the market, and by building a plan that can bend without breaking, you give yourself the absolute best chance to turn that nest egg into the long, secure, and happy retirement that you've worked so hard for.